Hi everyone, this is Jacqui from Jacqui Photography. I hope you're all keeping really well. I know we're going through a really tough time at the moment with this COVID-19. And sadly, because I teach photography with groups of people, I've had to stop my business. And I've had a lot of people saying, why don't I do some online classes? Well, I've never done one before, but I'm willing to give it a go. So here I am, and I've decided to use this photograph from our Docklands workshop, and I thought I'd show how I develop it, because I've had a lot of people come into this class and we've all gone out and tried to get this photograph together, and a lot of you have achieved it, which is great. So anyone that hasn't been with me, this is a really terrific class. It's not my Harbour Lights one, it's my Docklands one. So we start up near that, see that round building up the top up here, and we start up in this area, which is where I had my very first Docklands workshop many years ago. And we walk down alongside here, along the boats, and then we end up where we're standing now. So this photograph was taken with my 5D Mark IV, and you can see the information that's along the side here. So it will give me the 5D Mark IV. It also tells me that I shot with my 1635 f2.8 Mark III lens, one of my favorite for landscaping. I didn't quite bring it out at the 16, I shot it at 23mm. So I've brought it in a little bit, cropped up a little bit, and this photograph, of course, was taken at sunset. But it didn't quite look like this when I began, so I'm going to show you what it did look like. If I go over here up the top, we've got library, and then we've got the develop module. I'm going to click on the develop module, and I'm already in our before and after. And you can see on the left-hand side, the raw photograph is quite dark. And on the right-hand side, I've brought in the light. I want to show you exactly how I did that, and before I do, I'll just show you down the bottom. This is where I saw the before and after. So you can flick before and choose the way that you would like to view your before and after. I particularly like it this way. I don't like much if I split the frame so you can see the two difference in the colour. So there certainly is a difference with that sunset, and I've obviously done a little bit of cropping because the Balti bridge hasn't matched up. And I'll just go again. This is the one that I prefer to look at when I'm looking at my before and after. If I click on this one little loop, there's a message for me. If I click on this one little loop here, that will show me the entire photograph on its own. I can navigate and fill the screen by using on the left hand side under navigator. I can hit fill, I can hit 1:1, which if I use the little box here, I can zoom around in the photograph and have a look at it in my 1:1s. I'm going to hit on fit to be able to show you what I've done here. Now, what I'm going to do now is say goodbye to this photograph. But before I do, I'm going to just click here, and I'm going to make myself a virtual copy. So if I create a virtual copy, I just click on the button there. So that was a little right click, and then I have a virtual copy sitting at the side. So you can see this picture is number 2, and this picture number 1, that's the original one. And now so I've always got that one, but I can hit reset. And it goes back to what I had before. So it does look completely different to what you saw a moment ago. So now I'd like to just show you how I actually would edit this photograph myself. So because I've saved this photograph in RAW, it allows me to make every kind of adjustment I want to by using the right-hand panel. You can see it down here. We've got basic tone curve and so on. I've left open camera calibration because that's where I like to begin. A lot of people start with choosing their black and their white, but for me, I want to start in camera calibration, and I want to check out here with our Adobe Standard Faithful Landscape, Monochrome, Neutral, Portrait, and back to Standard. Now in there, I'll choose what I think I like that's going to suit this photograph. So you can see as I change it, it will look a little bit different in the screen. So you can see this one's had a little bit more blue up the top compared to what it looked like in standard. And that was faithful. If we go to landscape, you can see the colour pops a little bit more orange in the middle here, or pinks and oranges, peachy colours. I'm going to pop down to monochrome, which is when we choose just to use black and white. Next, I'm going to have a look at neutral, and that's very soft colour tonings. I like neutral when I'm doing portraits. And then we can look at portraits, which again is quite soft, a little bit more blue than the last one, and then back to standard. Now the one that I liked best when I did this was I actually like faithful, so that's the one I'm going to choose for now. The next tab I want to choose is transform, so that's this one up here. I'm working in the solo mode, so you notice as I hit transform, the other tab below closes itself up. So if I right click on the black part here where it says just on here where it said transform, so I right click, you can see I've got solo mode clicked on just down here. I prefer to use that because I only want one tab open as I go. Now transform is going to straighten our photograph, and it's going to pick something in the photograph that actually has a straight line, and that's where it's going to choose it from. Believe me, transform doesn't always make the right decision, so you do need to override it at times. I'm just going to click through each one of these and show you what it does. So let's just hit auto, which is basically what I use most of the time, so that may not have made all that much of a difference, but it does sometimes make a little one. So what I would be looking at is that this bolty line is straight. So that's the one that I would be using myself as a little guideline. Let's go guided, and you can see it just moved back up a little bit. So this one means you draw 2 or more guides to get the right perspective. Level, and you can see we've just leveled out. So that's a really good one as well. So you can see that's found a straight line and leveled. We've got our vertical, which will then, what that will do is it makes our building stand up straight. You can't really see it in this one, but some buildings it will really bring it up straight, but it stretches out the perspective a little bit, so always watch that one as well. And we've got full, which is going to do level and vertical together. So you can see each of those did make the picture move a little bit. So I'm just going to go on auto on this. Sometimes I will check it by hitting, see our little crop tool up here. There's a ruler, and I will hit the ruler and take that ruler on the line that I think should be straight. And if you can see, if I grab the top of the bolty and I bring that down here to the bottom of the bolty, that's going to give me quite a straight line. And you can see it's cropped a little bit around the edges. You must hit done here for it to save. Excellent. So the next thing that we're going to go to is our lens corrections up here. I'll open up that panel. Now this is a really important panel that's really underused, and I find that this is one of the most important ones that I use. So on here we've got 2 things that we can do. We can remove chromatic aberration, and we can enable profile corrections. Now what enable profile corrections means that when we click this little button just here, you'll see the image just flattened itself out. It's kind of pulled itself in the middle here and flattened out the edges. If I turn it off again, just watch on the corners around here. You'll see that it vignettes. So you can see the vignetting, the natural vignetting from the lens, and I've used a landscaping lens, a 1635. When I click this, it even tells me here that I used a 1635 f2.8. So it knows the lens that I've used. It also knows which camera I've used. So if I click on here, it knows I've used a Canon. So I've actually used a Canon 5D Mark IV. Now, it's great because you can see also, if I zoom in, and I'll turn it on and off again, so you just see the area. So watch these buildings as I click it on and off, and it bends itself back in, and we watch these buildings come out, and they also basically they lighten up. So it lightens up the photograph. So I haven't gone up into this basics yet and done lighting, but I've been able to do it here, so I can see it's getting more of a natural light. Now this remove chromatic aberration, if I can say it properly, because sometimes I stumble over the words, apologize if I do, but this chromatic aberration, it's a problem. It fixes problems that we have in lenses, and it can sometimes be called color fringing. It's a purple color that will get along, let me try it on this side, along the edges, there we go, along the edges of buildings. It's not really showing too much here. Perhaps if I zoom in maybe a little bit more. So yeah, you can sort of see it'll come along the buildings, this sort of color of purple. It doesn't always present itself as purple. It can sometimes be red, green, blue, yellow, or magenta, with all different sorts of color. And it goes along the edges of photographs. It can even show up in a beach photograph on rocks. These colours, they especially will show up in a high contrast photograph, and that's one that has a lot of highlights or a lot of shadows going on in the photograph as well. And the reason that it occurs is because your camera lens, or the lens of your camera, it's a prism, and the light will pass through the prism, and the light is then bent, and the colour waves then become separated. The lens imperfections, they can cause the light to bend incorrectly, and the wavelengths will change their speed or their angle. And this results in this unsynchronized, using a big word, wavelength and colour blurring. So it gives you this abnormality in the photograph. So it's not showing a lot here, but it will show as I'm showing you there. So, so there's no lens that's perfect, and they're all going to suffer a little bit of chromatic aberration to some degree. It's really popular in the DSLRs, and we can see it all in this post-processing. So, yeah, so really great idea to hit this one on, I think, because I prefer to have that removed. Now for the fun bit, let's go up to our basics panel. So this is the bit that most people will start with. As you can see, I've gone to the other end. So this is what we began with. Let's have a look. And this is what we're up to now. So that's our little before and after, which I can show on here as well. So just your little before and after down the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to decide on our colour tone or our white balance that we have in the photograph. I tell people when we're out photographing, if they're going to choose JPEG, you have to choose this white balance while you're in this spot now. So while they're on location, because if they're doing JPEG, it's harder when you come back to be able to do it in this area. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look through these white balances. So let's have a look. This is our shot. We've got our auto, daylight, cloudy, getting a little bit warmer. You can see this number here will change. And then this is the one that I tell students to use, so shade. You can see it's come out a bit pinker. Tungsten, now we're going into our blues. So these we would use at night or inside of a building, because every light that we see in the city is a blue, is a tungsten or a fluorescent. Have a look at the fluorescent. And so we compensate by using those two white balances, and I would use those for my night photography. And flash, I really like flash. It's one of my favorites. The other thing is we have this little eyedropper here. You can see this little eyedropper. So if we can find a spot that's kind of got a bit of a neutral color and you hit it, so it just told me now, no, that's not a good neutral color. You can see by hitting that, it finds its own white balance. So then it's become here, it says custom. So that's not a bad sort of little white balance that we've got there, but I would possibly go back. Let's go back, because I tell students to use shade. So let's pop back to shade on there. So now what I want you to find is your blacks and your whites. So the way that we do this is I want you to hold down on your Alt key, and then you hold down. So I'm using a laptop here, and I haven't got a hand mouse, but I'm just using the mouse on the laptop, and I hold the left side of the mouse down. When I hover over the black, if I do it again, you'll see that the screen becomes white, and there's our black in there. So what I want to find is a little bit of black. So I'm just going to pull that to where I think I've got enough black in the photograph. Don't have to have a whole lot, but what we do want to have is some black areas and know that we've got a true black. So we're looking quite dark in the photograph, as you can see. So I'm going to go backwards. We're going to do the same with the white. So again, you're going to hold your Alt button, and you're going to hold down the left side of your mouse. Get over here, and you can see we've got a lot of white there. So as I pull it up, you can see how much white's in the photograph, and that's exactly where the sun is coming from. So I'm going to pull that white back, and I think that I will sit somewhere around about there. Oh, no, I think that's too bright, and you can do it by eye this way. Let's bring it down a little bit, so there's up, somewhere around about there. Okay, so I don't want too much white in the photograph, so that's probably enough. Now you see we need to fix up these shadows. So I always say to people, bring your shadows up. So what I'm going to do with my shadows is I'm going to push the slider to the right. So I am holding on my keyboard, I'm holding down my left side of the mouse, and I'm pulling up my shadows. I'll bring that up for you. So you can see as I bring up the shadows, I don't want to go all the way up because it gets washed out. So let's bring that back a little bit to where we've got good shadows. See, looks great. Now we want to play with our highlights. So I will tell my students, let's push those highlights down. So, and as that focus comes in, you can see how good that's looking. In the water, everything's looking pretty good there and very clear. Now the reason that's looking so clear is because we've used the big F number, and I can tell you it is because as we scoot along here, there we go. In this area here, we've got a starburst, and that's by making sure that our aperture is shut down nice and tight. Excellent. We'll zoom back out. Now don't forget you have your navigator up here, so we can be zooming in and out with our navigator on the side. So I'm just using my mouse button and clicking in and out. So gone from here to here. And the next one I want to do is look at our exposure. Do we want to take a little bit of that exposure out? Possibly. As you see, when I bring exposure down, the sunset kind of pops a little bit more. So we can either bring it down a little bit, but we lose this in the buildings a little bit. Maybe bring up the buildings slightly more, like that. But we can fix this up afterwards. Now, I might just play a little bit with the temperature there. So let's have a look if we slide and bring it up. What I don't want is this to turn to a horrible colour in that area. There's the sun sitting right behind that building in there. Okay, so I'm quite happy with this photograph as it's coming right at the moment. We do have a little bit of darkness coming in this area here. So what we can do is up here we have a graduated filter. I can click on that, and when I click on it, see this little cross? I can drag that up from the bottom there. Now it's sitting on exposure here. It's probably the one I want. It's brightened up that area. Let's just brighten it down just a little bit, but like that. And you can drag this around. In fact, you can turn it around. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm happy with that, but I want to do the same thing in the sky up here and kind of reflect what I just did. So let's do the same thing. I'm dragging down. Don't want it bright. We don't want it that dark either. Beautiful. Okay, so the next buttons I want to show you are our clarity, our vibrance, and our saturation. Please be extremely careful with clarity. When I hit that, you can see that the buildings get a lot of black in them. It just looks too much. You don't want to have it looking that way, see, with the clarity. Now I'm just going to slide this back to where it began, and when we bring it up, and we take it down. A lot of people take it down when they want to smooth out skin or bring it up when they want that kind of grungy look, but it doesn't look as good as if you just put a slight bit of clarity in. That's what we want. You can see what happens with the color balance too as we do that. See how it's become washed out? Just down in here, as I bring it back, we bring it back. Beautiful. Now, I only want a little bit of clarity in, but we're going to look at these two buttons, vibrance and saturation. And be really careful with these two. We don't want your photograph looking like this. Yes, it was a sunset, and yes, it was bright, but I'm sure you didn't see it that color. Now, saturation can always take out the color too, so then we've got a black and white. But we only ever want to add or have the photograph look the way that we saw it when we were out in the field. We don't want it to look crazy. So I'm just going to leave my saturation back at 0. And let's look at our vibrance. So vibrance is very similar to saturation, but what it does is it maintains great flesh colors when we use it. So yes, we do want a little bit of saturation in there, but we don't want to go too crazy with the saturation, or vibrance. So I'm going to leave it about there. So let's have a look at that compared to that. And we're not quite finished yet anyway. So there we go. So I'm going to have that much saturation in, and I'm going to leave my vibrance as it was. Now we can, in here, we can brighten these colors up more as well. So we've got a couple of ways of doing it. So if we go down to here, we've got HSL color and black and white on this panel. And there's a little button just here. So what we do is we drag that onto the area that we want to brighten up. So I'm going to drag it here onto that peachy color. Now what I've chosen is hue. So you can see that there is some little arrows either side here of my little square where I've hit. If I push the arrows up and down, you can see that hue is changing color. So it's only affecting our oranges and our yellows. Looks a bit odd, doesn't it? As we go. So I'm going to bring that back, but that will change our hues. So let's just play with those sliders ourselves. I'm just going to bring that back, and maybe, yes, we do want to change it to perhaps rather than yellow, we could make it a little bit oranger. Now we've got the same with saturation. We can saturate our oranges and our yellows in that area as well. So if I get in here, I'm going to click in the area I want and use those up and down buttons. So you can see over here in saturation, over here, it's changing. I'm going to put a bit more in. There we go. So about there. Don't really like too much yellow coming in. Just take that out a little bit. So there you go. Now we can do the same with blues because we've got blues up here, but I'm not going to do the blues because I don't want to do blues in this area. So if I did use the blue slider and saturate it, see what happens to our buildings and what happens to this area. I don't particularly like that. So let's bring that blue back to where it was. We could do luminous. Let me just show you what that does. So see these corners here and here? I'm going to just bring that up a little bit and get rid of those dark corners just there. And excellent. So that's done. going to go here, and I'm going to choose, so this adjustment brush. So I click on here. I do want to make this pop a bit around this area, so I'm going to click this adjustment brush, and I'm going to choose, let's say, brighten, no, color pop. So my color pop is set to have a little bit more saturation in it and a little bit of contrast. So let's slide that, and I'm just going to pop up that saturation just in these areas. If I put the mask on, you can see where I've been brushing. I can make that brush a little bit bigger just by hitting that area there. I'm not doing this, I'm not being overly precious about doing it. Okay. Now I do want to lighten up these buildings. I'm going to use the same adjustment brush, and I'm going to say exposure. So you can see that has the exposure up, and let's just make that a little bit smaller. Now if I was taking my time to do this, guys, to show you, I would be pulling into those buildings very carefully, and it would take me some time to make sure that I get all the edges properly, but I just want to show you the basics of what I would do. So if you're doing something like this, please take your time. Yeah, you can see if I slid that slider up, I can even put the overlay if I want to be very careful and see where I've missed. Turn that overlay off, and then I'm going to move this exposure to exactly how much I would like. So there we've got the buildings going. Have a look at our contrast, maybe our shadows. See, our shadows make a bit of a difference. It definitely will. If I go in here, Navigator, slide over to this area, you can see in here the shadows make a big difference. Once that comes into it, there we go. There we go. Now don't forget to hit your done button. Let's have a look. So we've gone now from this to this. I'm going to hit the fit button and look at it back on my screen. Excellent. Now if you do have any marks in your sky, so now you can see I do have a little bit of a dust spot here and one just here. So I've used this little brush here, and I click, and it will find a spot that looks very similar to what I've got here. And I'm using the clone. You can use clone or heal. So I'm going to use clone, and I say done, and you'll notice that that little spot's gone. So as I scoot round, I always make sure at the end of doing a photograph, whether or not I need to fix any of those. So there could be more, and sometimes I actually like to fix it in Photoshop and take the image out by right-clicking, and then I decide to edit this photograph in Photoshop. So I find here, and then I will edit through Photoshop, because I find that my Lightroom sometimes struggles. Now, we haven't looked at detail, so let's go into detail. Now, this is one that drives me a little bit nuts when people decide that they haven't got a sharp enough photograph because they haven't shot it on the right F number, and they decide, well, then I'm going to sharpen it up when I come in post-processing. So they push on the button here and they sharpen up this way. Now what that does is it actually causes what we call noise in the photograph. And when we have noise, you can see it all through here and here. It does ruin the photograph. The whole reason that we actually shot in at 100 ISO is so that we did not have this noise that comes in the photograph. So we don't want it. So we don't want to sharpen. So can you see all this noise that's showing? There we go, all that noise. That's horrible. And we don't want it. We don't want a grungy photograph. We don't want to see that noise. So by sharpening, we're going to see it. So let's bring our sharpening back. And yes, you can sharpen, but just a little bit. So I recommend around about 42. So let's have a look. 43, you can type it in if you want. 42 is usually about where I sharpen. I bring the masking up a little bit just to straighten up and clip those edges just a little bit. Now, the other one that we have here is noise reduction, and be careful with that as well. So if you push that too far on noise reduction, what will happen is all your edges become super soft, and you don't want that either. So if I push that up, it's going a little bit slower at the moment, but you can see right now everything looks soft. We don't want that either. So we want that sharp, crisp detail. So just maybe a little bit, but not much at all. You don't need to do it because we've shot this on a very good ISO. So I'm going to close that one down, and the last one that we're going to look at here is our effects. So we open up effects, and we've got this is your vignetting. So don't forget, we've got rid of some of the vignetting that's there. And when I push this up, you can see how dark it is. Now, this is back from the 80s. I used to do a lot of this. I did it when I did portrait photography. We used to always vignette. And so, yes, you can vignette, but please keep it very, very light. You can go dark like this so that you can see what you're vignetting. But as I go back, so you can choose the type of shape that you want by using your midpoint and your roundness, but then go dark, but then bring it back to where you just want a tiny bit in the corners. There we go, like that. Beautiful. So let's have a look at the two. Now back to the one that we've been working on here. Excellent. Now don't forget that you can look at this by using your YY. And there's our before and after, and we're looking at it side by side, but we can choose to maybe want to look at it as a split, and what a difference that makes. Top and bottom, and split from top to bottom. Let's just put that back to where we were. Now, last thing that I will do is show you how to crop. So here we have our crop here, and we've got it at original, and quite often I will keep it at original. But if we do that, we're going to lose sight of the buildings. So what I would like to show you is a little bit of a panoramic. So I already have some custom ones set in here, but I'm going to choose 1 to 2. So if you wanted to make 1 to 2 on your computer, on your Lightroom, you can enter custom. So 1, and just pop 2 here, hit OK, and now you have a crop of a 1, 2. And when you push up and down on your photograph, when you're in the crop, you can see the rule of thirds popping up. I'm going to make sure that that bulky bridge here and here is in the center of that rule of thirds. Now that would mean that this building here and this building here would have the same amount of distance from there to down here, and it'd be the same here and here, so that we have a perfect reflection if I use that rule of thirds. Excellent. Now when you do crop, don't forget you must hit done. And don't forget, in crop you also have this leveler, and I'll show you that again. So you hit the straighten tool, and I'm going to use this bulky again because I know that I want my reflection to be straight down and down. It's giving me a little bit of a different angle, and there you go. So that's my finished picture. So I'll export that one out myself, and then I'm just going to export it with my last one, so export with previous, and I'll put that at the end of the video. So have a great day, and if you want me to edit anything in particular, send it to me. I'm okay with Lightroom, but not so great with Photoshop, but I'll give anything a go. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you got lots of toilet paper. Catch you later, Jack.